A colleague made this dress for me when I was still breastfeeding, but I have stopped breastfeeding, and as you can see, it no longer fits well along the bust and the underbust. In the previous video, I showed you how to draft a pattern for this underbust, overbust, asymmetrical corset, and in this video, we are going to be sewing it together. You're welcome to Kemafrik. My name is Kemi Omorugbe. Here are all the fabric pieces I transferred from my pattern, and as you can see, I added 1/2 inch seam allowance to each panel with 1 inch side seam allowance. Don't forget to put in your notches, especially along the bust line and the underbust line. This will make sewing easier for you. For the center panel, I decided to replace the original fabric with this lace fabric, which just mimics the color and the texture of the dress itself. And under the lace, I have a layer of tulle just to help it blend in. I have ironed in my interfacing on both the lining and the main fabric for each of the panels. Here we'll go ahead to start sewing the panels together, lining to lining and the main fabric to the main fabric. Don't throw away your pattern once you're done transferring it to fabric, because it will just make your job easier. I like to just remove the pattern, pin the panels together so I know exactly which of the panel is supposed to be sewn onto the other side. Okay, so this is what I have right here. I haven't sewn, but all my panels are pinned together, the lining and the main fabric. Before we go ahead to the sewing process, I'm going to mark out the pattern for the wording I'll be using for the backup. Okay, so here is my front pattern, right? I'm just going to mark from the upper chest line onto the underbust line. Just watch me do that. I am marking my pattern very close to the neckline, just so I can have that firm structure in that part of the corset. There we have it. Don't forget to label your pattern and to indicate the direction. And also, when you transfer this pattern to fabric, don't forget to notch the bust point. Now I'm transferring the pattern for the wording onto the wording, and along the dart line I added 1/2 inch sewing allowance, but that's the only part I added seam allowance. And here are my notches right there. I made use of a very lightweight wording, and I cut 2 pieces for each because we are going to also use the same wording to flesh out the cup. Here I am attaching the wording onto the main fabric, and I went ahead to press it properly just to help it stick onto it. Now onto the sewing process. I am joining all my panels together by the seam allowance, that is 1/2 inch seam allowance. I will also do the same thing on the lining. Here are all the panels for the back, and just like I did for the front, I'm removing my patterns and pinning all the panels together. Then I'll go ahead to join each side together by 1/2 inch separately, of course, because we have our lace at the center back, right? I'm doing the same thing on the lining for the back piece. This is what we have for the front and the back piece, looking pretty already. At this stage, you can go ahead to press open your seam allowances. You will need a tailor's hammer to help you get that rounded shape along the cup. Here comes the back piece already. I love this look. Well, let's move ahead. Recall that we added, oh, I know I didn't mention it, well, we added our cup onto the lining, not the main fabric. Okay, and this is what we have here. The boning I'll be using on this piece is the wriggling boning, which means that you can sew along the side. Okay, so if you're going to be using a plastic boning, you just need to create a channel and insert it into it. Now we have to encase this boning, right? So I'll pick up a piece of fabric right there, which is about 2 inches wide, even though I ended up trimming some of the allowances. Okay, but just make it 2 inches wide. Now go ahead and measure the length you need for each of the seam lines. Note that I removed about 3/4 inch from this length at the top and at the bottom. Okay, that means my boning channel is about 2.5 inches shorter than the length I just measured. Now that is not compulsory, especially if you are going to pipe along the hem and along the neckline. I subtracted 0.75 inch from the bottom and the top. Okay, and this is what we have. So that means that my fabric piece that I'm using for encasing has to be longer by 0.75 inch at the top and 0.75 inch at the bottom, so that it runs from the top to the bottom of the entire corset. Now I went ahead to sew about half an inch seam on, let's say, the right side. Then I'll be turning it around like so, and I will turn it all over again. Just watch me, please, because I don't know how to explain this process properly. Then I'll go give it a good press. Okay, that's the first turning I did right there, and I'm just pressing that in. I trimmed out the excess allowance along the right. Then I went ahead to turn the seam again. I gave it another good press. Now, if the allowance you have left is still wider than the width of your wriggling boning, you still need to trim it so that it doesn't show when you sew it, right? Okay, but I went ahead now to sew on the fabric without the wriggling bone, just at the side right there. Then I sew it, then trim off the excess allowance like so, and then I turned it around and top stitch. This time both on the wriggling boning and on our corset piece. You can go ahead to top stitch on the other side to make it uniform, but yeah, I didn't end up doing it for my bonings. I went ahead to repeat this process for each of these boning channels. And here I have decided I'm going to add an additional boning channel along this side just to create a style line and to help that protrusion at the side to stand out more uniquely. I will also be adding another boning channel in between my style lines. Now let's go ahead to add some structure around our bra cup. Peer pressure almost made me do bust caging for this corset, but yeah, I just decided not to do it because I am putting it over a dress that already has some structure along the cups. Okay, so but I decided to use a method that you may not have seen before. Okay, although we all know of underwire, right? But I'll be improvising an underwire here just to go around there and make the neckline look very firm. This underwire will also go under the bust to define the bust properly. So watch me do that. Fashion designing is all about creativity. A very long time ago, I stopped thinking about how people achieved certain things, but I start thinking creatively instead. What can I do to create this? That's what brought me to this point. Now I'm going to be using a strip of my soft wadding as a channel for this boning. So I'm just sewing it in. It is just about half an inch wide, and I am sewing it on both sides to create a channel for my improvised underwire. This is the underwire I'll be using. I actually got this from a fabric store a while back when I was thinking of what to use to improvise because I couldn't get an underwire to buy. Here I am measuring out the length I will need to cut out, and once I got this measurement, I went ahead to cut that same measurement on the underwire. I folded it and then got another one. It is a little thin, so I wanted to double it up. So this is what I have right there. I thought it would cost me blood and sweat to cut this. You just need to twist, and then it's, cuts off itself. But this is what we have. I'll go ahead to insert this into my created channel. But before doing that, I needed to wrap the tip so that it doesn't pierce my corset. Once I was done inserting it, I closed up that corner right there so that it doesn't come out, of course. And I decided to add an underwire to this underbust part of the corset. And just like I did on the first side, I still sew in my improvised channel right there and inserted the length of the underbra wire that I needed. Here's what I have after sewing in my additional boning. This definitely made it look. When I was sewing the ones at the side, I also didn't include boning into about 1 inch at the top and also 1 inch at the bottom, just to leave room for sewing. And here is our bra cup and the entire lining. Now, like I mentioned earlier on, I will be covering up my seams using this along the cup. This is not compulsory. You can achieve the same thing using fiber. I just didn't have that available. In fact, that would have been better, but it is also not compulsory. So to attach the two cups to each other, I just used my glue right there. Now I'm going to be joining the front pieces to the back pieces, and of course it is lining to lining, main fabric to main fabric. If you don't want to join these pieces together this way, you can actually turn your neckline first before joining the side seam. It depends on what you want. I am sewing the pieces together by 1/2 inch side seam allowance. I honestly shouldn't have added up to 1 inch side seam allowance when I knew I would still trim it up. So I trimmed off about 1/2 inch like so. I went ahead to iron open my seam and then I attached ridgeline boning along the side. Gone are those days when we didn't used to attach boning to the side, but yeah, we have moved forward. Now I'm going to be turning the neckline of this entire corset. I just laid the lining over the main fabric, making sure that my seam lines and the whole thing aligns together properly. I'll go ahead to stitch the neckline of the entire corset by 1/2 inch. Here I'll be going ahead to top stitch on the lining for the back piece, and that's because I can no longer access the lining of the front piece. So for this reason alone, it may just be better to, you know, turn the neckline individually before joining the front to the back pattern. So I went ahead to top stitch on the lining, making sure that the seam allowance faces the lining. So you're top stitching on lining and seam allowance by about 1/4 inch. This step helps your lining sit into your corset without poking out of the neckline, if you understand what I mean. This is our entire corset after that process, and now we are going to close up the center back by stitching the lining onto the main fabric by 1/2 inch. At the center back, I top stitch 1/2 inch away just to create a channel for the boning we'll be attaching. I actually contemplated, you know, fixing my eyelet in between two boning channels, but then that last channel was just so close to the next one that I didn't want that area to look clumsy at all. So I just created only one channel for the boning at the center back. The last step for this, no, not the last step, is to close up the hem, and I'm using the piping method right here. I cut a strip of fabric on bias and I'm stitching it onto the corset by 1/2 inch, right side facing the right side. Ensure that you close up the top of your bias strip by folding it inward. As you may have noticed, there's the part of this corset that is spiky along the hem, right? So I just decided to, you know, attach my piping separately, okay, from the center back to that point, then from the other side of the center back to that point. Okay, so here I closed up that tip by folding in about 1 inch, and now I am turning my bias strip twice in such a way that you don't see any part of the strip on the right side. Okay, you know there are different types of piping, but that was the method I used for this. I went ahead to top stitch on the bias strip. On the right side, this is what one side looks like. Now go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. Here is our finished corset. It looks so good. Well, it is time to now attach eyelets onto my corset. If you want to learn how to do this, please check the video I'll be linking above, where I explicitly explained 4 functions of the rivet or grommet machine. I will link up the video above and in the description box. To attach your eyelets, make sure you place them uniformly on both sides of the back piece. I punctured the corset using my seam ripper and scissors. Here we have it, but before you go, let me show you how this looks on my dress. It actually leveled it up. It took it from a 3 to a 10/10 minus nothing. That lady right there is my younger sister, and the tutorial for the outfit she has on right now will be next on the channel. So this is your cue to subscribe if you haven't. If you have found this video helpful, please let me know in the comment section. That will encourage me to do more of things like this. And don't forget to share it. I know I've said it before, but if you haven't subscribed, in fact, just check now, because sometimes you think you have subscribed but you didn't subscribe. Okay, please check and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching. This is me saying goodbye. See you in my next video. Bye.